Good. My usual disclaimer, I threw this together in an hour at lunchtime today because I realised I had to do it. I'm in no way an expert on porter, but I just did a count. I've made 22, so I definitely like them. And it was one of the first beers I brewed. So I'm not going to talk about all the different types of styles and how to brew each one, but I'll tell you, I think there's just a little bit on porter, and then a bit of a discussion about the beer that keeps winning things and the recipe, etc. to go. So yeah, just stop me if you have any questions, and we'll go from there. So hard to start, and there's a lot of information on these slides, most of which I expect you to read later. So I'm just gonna, I didn't have time to go through and bullet point it. I just literally cut and pasted stuff and tried to put something together. But you know, the endless discussion about what is a porter and when is it a stout. So what are we actually talking about? I mean, porter was the first, I guess, commercially, industrially made beer. So it was very popular back in the 18th century. Came out of London, big in Dublin as well in the end. I think probably everything on this slide, someone like Martin, what's his name, the historian, Martin would dispute. Maybe Peter Simmons can help as well. So like I say, I just cut and pasted this from Wikipedia, but it was really popular and expanded around the world. Essentially, porter, a strong porter, was called a stout, but it's very blurred between the two. In the way I kind of label things, whether I call them a porter or a stout, I've just got a really simple rule. If it's got roast barley in and it's dry, you know, that drying on the finish, then I call it a stout. If it's a bit sweeter and it's just kind of black malt and no roasted barley, then I call it a porter. But you know, that's just something that I do essentially. So yeah, like I said, it was the first beer that was made on any large scale. It started quite strong, got a bit weaker, and I think key things that I tried to highlight in here is, you know, the first ones were brewed from brown malt. So we'll have a little bit of a talk about what brown malt is. And for quite a while, that was all that they could use, and then you know, kilned. So first of all, when they got hydrometers, they realised that actually they weren't getting as much extract and sugar out of brown malt as they were pale malt, and so then there became a move to how can we make this with pale malt. That was solved when they invented black malt, essentially, you know, roasting it in a tumbling drum to stop it catching on fire. And so, you know, the taste of porter has really changed from 100% brown malt to pale malt plus black malt, and then later on all sorts of adjuncts and all sorts of things going into that, into try and get some of the flavours back of brown malt. So by taking out the brown malt and using pale malt, how do you get it to taste black and portery, and using licorice and all sorts of things there. And another key thing is, you know, they were aged in large vats. They would hold hundreds and hundreds of barrels. I was trying desperately to find it. I've even seen pictures of people having a dinner party within one of the vats. I don't know if that was a US picture that I could find, but you know, like 20 seats put out with people having a dinner in before they filled it up with porter. So these were really big, and essentially they were blended. So what would happen is, you know, time is money and all that. Big porter breweries would store, and I think they even had places that would buy mild or fresh porter and then store it and then sell it on for much more once it had been matured. And then people blended them in the pubs essentially. So, you know, the mature stuff, the porter would be more expensive because it's been held and all that extra cost. Like I say, time is money, etc. And mild porter, you know, mild meaning fresh, would be blended, you know, half and half, 3 threads, that type of thing for the stouts. So, you know, really long history, first commercial beer, lots of changing flavors, lots of different hopping rates. If you read this later, you'll see it started high, it's gone down, it's gone back up again, and then gradually, I guess, faded out in the UK, got really popular still in Ireland, in Dublin, etc., and kind of, I guess, reborn again a little bit when the US took it on and started making, American porters and amping everything up a little bit. And still, I think, I don't know, I can't think when I last saw a porter, not the most popular in the craft beer. As Mick said, it's all about hops at the moment. Hopefully it will swing back to dark beer at some point, but yeah, very popular. So these were the vats. You can see these for scale. So what's that guy in the middle? So it must be what's with that hat on, 7 foot, so 14 to 20. So you're talking 25 foot, maybe even more. That picture on the left, you can see just these huge places that were just storing porter. And then the famous problem that you got with that, there was a beer flood. There was a massive vat in the Myrrh Brewery right on Tottenham Court Road, right in the centre of London. One of the 22-foot tall wooden vats burst. That broke open a few others, and there was a wave of porter. It knocked out the back wall of the brewery into a slum dwelling, and I think killed 8 people. So yeah, dangerous stuff. This porter as well. Couldn't do a talk on porter without putting that in. So yeah, brown malt. So what's brown malt? So originally, it was brownish beer. It wasn't, it was just made and kilned a little bit longer to be brown. I've done some of the history piece in there, but essentially the original way that it was made, the brown malt would become blown. So it would be hot so long that it would literally, I guess, pop a little bit like a popcorn or something, but with malt. And would blow it and would be called blown malt. So, similar to brown malt, but essentially we don't do that today. Again, it was worked out that it was cheaper to use pale malts instead, and then there were levies from the French, etc., reducing, making malt more expensive. And what's it say? It says even in the mid-19th century, you're still using it, but really just adding it then as a specialty grain. So people were making porters, they've gone to the new way with pale and black malt, but adding some of this to get some of the flavour back. And then there's a list at the bottom, I think we talked through earlier, people adding all sorts of stuff in, which, can still happen. Molasses, treacle, licorice. I think there was something there I'd never heard of. It looked like a spelling mistake to begin with. Essia concept. Where is it? I can't see. And just different adjuncts. Actually, there was a rule. I think there was a law in the UK, wasn't there, that they banned the use of adjuncts for a bit like our own Reinheitsgebot, because people were putting in all sorts of pretty nasty stuff into porter to try and get the flavour back. So I think in here it talks a little bit about how you actually make it. So, blowing the malt, where you get where it's blown. There's some discussion there around, was it slightly smoky? As well, could it have been because it was dried over straw, wood and fern, and then moving as malting has gone on to remove some of that. And I think that's it's up in the air, isn't it, whether the smoke from these coke fires and wood fires was above the malt, whether it was, whether it actually imparted a big smoky flavour onto the malt. But again, loads to play around with in terms of using smoky porters. I actually use amber malts. I'm going to talk here about amber malt. So amber malt is kind of made in a similar way, but not quite the same way. And it gives you more biscuit sort of flavours. A little bit toasty, a little bit sweet, but essentially it's like a lighter brown ale. And I'll tell you why I'll use that in a minute. In terms of the BJCP, I said I wouldn't go through these, but just for completion, so they've got 4 different porter categories now. So there's good old English porter that we're kind of talking about today, American porter where everything's amped up and can have, you know, quite a bit of citrusy and American type hops in there. Baltic porter, so this is more a lagery porter with a lot of licorice and coffee in, quite strong. Got very popular in the Baltic some time ago. And then the historical beer, pre-prohibition porter, which I know absolutely nothing about, so I can't talk to that. But the stuff is there if you want to compare it. And interestingly, if you look at all the appearances, I don't think many of them mention black. I tend to make my porters completely black, but pretty much I think all of those say that it's none of them are black. And I think I remember that when we set up Black Friday, that actually I kind of filtered the whole BJCP categories by the maximum EBC, and I don't think porters tips into what they would call black. But you do see quite a lot of black porters, and you do see quite a few brown porters as well. But yeah, I'm pretty much always aiming for black personally. So this was the beer I was asked to talk about. Bring Your Daughter to the Porter. I'm not even an Iron Maiden fan, to be honest, but I just kind of liked having a music link. I had a whole, you probably got one as well, Steve. I had a whole series of beers named around music that I was doing. But this was my first good go at having a go at Photoshop. And it probably took me longer to get from that album on the left to the one on the right than it did to make the beer. Yeah, very, very slow, but managed to get there. And you can see, made it, I think the first one I made for the Black Friday, because you can see the Iron Maiden poster I replaced with the Black Friday. I had to get I think it was milk that I had to then invert, being poured to get the black porter, and then put the bottle in the top. So yeah, my favorite label. And essentially, it's had a few different names. If I use amber malt, which was the first one, I called it Bring Your Daughter to the Porter. But if I use brown malt, and I've interplayed between the two, then I just changed the names a little bit. And then I did try and recreate what some of these old porters might be like by wood aging one and Brett aging one, and you know, called that similar as well. But all of those recipes I'll show you in a page or two. But they're all essentially the same base beer. Roughly, and you can see it just doesn't seem to. It seems to get a medal or place in every competition I put it in, right the way back from 2015. You can see it was winning quite a lot through to winning the Hartford Brew Club one, and they that was sponsored by Tring, and they made my beer to the recipe we went. They manufactured it. And I was really keen that they were able to age it for a couple of months. So I think it was the only beer at the festival that had clearly been sat around for 2 or 3 days. And I can't quite see it because I've got you guys down on the right. But that picture of, yeah, it was the best looking beer for sure at the festival, the head on it and that conditioning as well. So I do think with these amber and brown malts, they get a lot more rounded and drinkable after 2 or 3 months. For me, they seem to taste a bit, chemically is a rubbish word, especially for a chemist to use, but they taste a little bit synthetic for a while, and that just seems to drop off if you can leave them for a couple of months. So it was good. And then I think it was the Welsh Nationals. I heard an audible groan when they read the name out, and I thought everyone's getting fed up with me with this beer. So I kind of retired it from competition. But I made it again for the Haysenbrau this year, and in honour of James as well. I named it after his dog. So yeah, I managed to win the Haysenbrau as well, although it was pretty close, I think, Darren, right? So yeah, so been very successful, and I'm pretty sure that is the most medalled homebrew beer in the UK. When we've got a list with them all in, I've not seen anyone else win with the same beer, particularly if you then work out that I've changed the names and the recipes a little bit as time goes on. So yeah, people like it. Get back. So and I'm going back with 2015, how did we design, how did I design a recipe? What would I be looking for in a porter? So I think, for me, amber or brown is key in this beer. That makes all the difference. I have made porters like, what's the London one? Fuller's porter, which doesn't have amber or brown in, more chocolatey taste. So there's, the guidelines, the descriptors and what you can, put in there can vary quite a lot. But this one definitely has amber or brown malt. I ordered it. I can't remember if it was Brew UK or the Malt Miller that I ordered it from, but I ordered brown malt and they sent me amber malt by mistake, and it was brew day, so I shoved it in. A nice happy coincidence, or I can't remember what Bob Ross or whatever would call it. Yeah, so that's why it's got amber in and not brown. I intended it to have brown. Of course, they then replaced it with brown. I brewed it again with brown in, and I much prefer the amber one. And I've never quite got round to going 50-50, but I have kind of used either, and sometimes it's just what I've got in stock. The other thing to note with both amber and brown is they are very variable depending on the maltsters. So, it's not as finely tuned as, making the crystal malts and pale malts. You will get a bit of difference between maltsters. So again, you can just try out different ambers, different browns. I think the colour difference in the amber can be quite significant. Even just, there's a couple that you can buy at Malt Miller. I can look up which one I use if people want to have later. You want a bit of sweetness, so a bit of crystal malt in there. I had a bit of a dalliance in 2015 with crystal rye. I was putting rye in everything to give it a bit of a spiciness. I don't know whether that's really coming through in this beer, but it was winning, so I've left it in. So that might be something you could just drop out. And again, I think the ratio of crystal malt and crystal rye depends what I've got in stock at the time. Bit of carapils for head retention. Again, this is when I was starting out, so that's what I did. Again, I'm not sure if you really need it, but there's a little bit of that in there. And then really playing around with chocolate malt, that sort of coffee type flavour, black malt to give you the colour, and then I'm quite a fan of pale chocolate. And just trying different ratios of them and trying different things to do with them as well. Do you mash cap? Do you put them all in to begin with? I think there's some new dehusked chocolates and things around that I've seen, and double roasted chocolate malt I think you can get. I don't think it's just double roasted crystal that do. So there's plenty to play around with on the toastiness and roastiness. I've mashed them all at 66 until recently, when I had a shallow grave and the body on it was just unbelievable. So I looked it up, and he mashes at 68. This is Jamil Zainashev from Heretic. So I have started to move to 68. Having said that, I was in a rush with the Haysenbrau beer, and whilst I was trying to get to 68, I think it was even under 63 and seemed to come out all right. But I'm essentially pushing my mash temperatures up quite a lot. I just noticed that's what Heretic are doing with pretty much all their beers, seem to have quite a high FG. I think Shallow Grave, and I looked up, was about 10-18 maybe to finish. So yeah, so just changes that I'm making recently. It's 1054, 1056, somewhere around there, but around 1060, 60 UBC, and I tend to add all of the speciality malts, and then I'll adjust the black or whatever to get that right. I've not been too fussed about bittering hops, so anything essentially, and just what I've got to use up. I've always gone in the past for UK or maybe Styrian Goldings or something like that if I've had it around, but Shallow Grave again blew me away a bit. That's got Columbus in, so I've just started using cleaner bittering hops more, and I think that made quite a difference. I think the last one I made for the Haysenbrau was the best one I've made actually. So yeah, just changing, go for something high alpha early on, but then using anything 1 or 2 grams per litre, about 1/4 of an hour from the end. And I've actually mostly used homegrown hops for that, or some hops from the car park at work or wherever. essentially. It's not a massive part of the beer, so I don't think you need to worry too much about that. Water's easy, you know.
Did you say hops in the car park at Workley?
Yeah, there's a big bush, there's a whole hedge, and it just had hops growing out of it everywhere. I could have picked tons of them, but no idea what they were. They smelled all right, but yeah.
It wasn't like a sort of guerrilla hop seeding of just sort of...
No, good idea though. When I went back the second year to pick it, I was watching them, you know, every day walking past, and they're just about ready to pick. Went away for the weekend, came back, and the bloody groundsman had chopped the whole lot down, so they completely disappeared. So, but yeah, I mean, I guess, you know, I'm just not too worried about the hops, and the same with the yeast. Pretty much any yeast I've used, whatever I had in stock at the time or fancy trying out, but I've definitely landed on West Yorkshire as my favourite English style, so I'll tend to go for that. And so at the bottom, it gets better for 2 or 3 months, particularly where the ones with brown and amber do. Water, London water, Dublin water's perfect. Lots of bicarbonate, lots of calcium. That gets your mash pH right. If you're adding in all of those black grains, then you don't need to worry about it, which is why those 2 brewing centres got popular. So pretty easy. If you are mash capping, and I've done that, I think on the last one I did some mash capping, then clearly you probably need to adjust the pH of your mash down a little bit, but you won't need to do that if you're adding everything in one go. And then I had a look through, so I can't see all of this. So these are all the times that I have brewed it. And then I thought I'd compare them and just bold. Oh, I didn't do enough bolding, did I? So you can see I've done brown a couple of times. Actually, the last one I used brown. I didn't have amber. So the Haysenbrau one was brown. Like I say, the second time I went to brown, but think I preferred the amber. Made it 3 times with the amber. Everything else is pretty steady there. Sorry, is that a question? No. The crystals maybe move around a little bit, would literally have been what I've got in stock. And again, I think the pale chocolate, I've fiddled around with that a little bit, but it's been roughly the same. And mash capped in the last one, I did think that made a little bit of difference, but pretty much see all the EBCs, IBUs are kind of in the same ballpark. Various hops, various yeasts. I think this is the end. Yeah. Okay, so that's how we develop that beer. That's you know, it was good out the packet. I'm really trying to struggle back for where I'd got the original recipe from. I'd made 3 or 4 porters before, so it might have been iterative, or I might have got it from the web, or you know, picked a few things and put them together. But the other good thing with porters is once you've got that, you know, slightly sweet, black, definitely a bit of roastiness and tastiness coming through, you can do all sorts of things with them. I've seen people making their own brown and purposely blowing their malt or amber malt in the ovens. I think you get something like pale. I can't remember if they started with green malt or there's another malt, isn't there, that's right at the beginning. Chip malt, is it? Or whether they start with pale malt, but you can look up on the web, you can make your own. Every year we make a synchronized beer on the roughly synchronized within a week or 2, which uses quite a lot of smoked malt. Smoke goes really well with porter. I pretty much always will wood age at least a portion of it on oak cubes or oak spirals or whatever. I've used all sorts of dark sugars, Mexican, Indian, whatever you can get your hand on, gives you nice. It gives a nice bit of complexity to it. I've tried to make orange and I tried to use bitter orange to get orange once, not have much success and get anything orangey, but it really works well with chocolate or cacao nibs. What's surprisingly good is black pepper porter, using quite a bit of ground up black pepper at the end of the boil and in the and as a dry pepper. And then every time I've made one of them, someone's pointed me at a new pepper. So I've tried a Grains of Paradise. I've got a long pepper one at the moment, which is a little bit too spicy, but works well with chili. I've made rye porters and stouts, with a bit more rye instead of the pale malt. You can pretty much get roasted rye, crystal rye. You could probably make a whole rye beer if you wanted to, and sorghum, things like that. If you get, I think it's Guinness, the Nigerian Guinness is made with quite a lot of sorghum, so lends itself well to these other grains. And then all sorts of herbs, spices. I've seen people put tonka beans in, and your man Randy Mosher talks about using mushrooms quite a lot. I think probably, to be honest, the recipe originally came from Randy Mosher, because I know the pepper one did. Yeah, I think that's it. So that's what I managed to throw together quickly. So probably a bit serendipitous to begin with to get the recipe nailed. But as you can see, my brewing style is quite like that. If I get close, then I'm not too worried about varying things like hops and yeast, etc. And all the beers always come out right. I swear, I think it's either the amber or the brown that makes all the difference with this beer, and you can pretty much mess around them with different crystals or whatever you want to do to layer it. And I don't know if I mentioned it. I think I wrote it in there. Key to a really good porter or stout is just layering all of those things. So you've got toastiness at the end, and roastiness can be bitter. You need something sweet and something just to take that away, hence the crystal and the specialty malts. But the world's your oyster with a porter. I think you can just keep going. Yeah.
I'm curious whether the Vic Secret flavour actually carried through into the beer.
Yeah, hard to know. I ended up. I mean, that was the first one on that line was always the bittering edition. So I don't think so. I mean, it would have been boiled for an hour, and you do an hour boiling peter. Well, what's the main thing with Vic Secret? What's the predominant characteristic? Is that a minty one?
No, it's quite a. The reason I asked, it's quite a strong hop, in flavour.
Yeah.
But perhaps, as you say, it's masked by the brown malt. Do you use crisp brown malt?
Yeah, crisp. So
yeah, I was really surprised to see those New World hops, and particularly the Columbus as well. I mean, that must have. I find even in a 60-minute boil, Columbus shows its head. It's quite resinous, and yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was, like I say, that was the big change for the last one. I kind of thought, well, if I'm going to start brewing it again, I'm going to do something different. And like I said, someone had given me a can of Shallow Grave, so I kind of looked at what they were using and thought, right, I'm going to try it. So, mashed higher and tried Columbus. I think it was a bit cleaner. So, I guess that's linked to Peter's question. I think there was character coming through before that. Columbus just really clean bittering. I say flavour, but that the quality of the bittering and whether it's a bit rough or clean was really clean with the Columbus.
And by the way, this New World appellation is total bollocks. Call it what it is. It's an Australian hop or it's a New Zealand hop. Thank you.
I'll go with just hop.
Earth hop. And 1060. Wow, that was.
Yeah.
I'm surprised at that as well.
Yeah, and you'll see that the reason I've gone up to 1060 from that 1056 is because I'm mashing higher. So I was expecting a higher final gravity. So it's just to keep the ABV the same, but push it up. Yeah, but at the same time, in the percentages, that's more of the dark grain. So I mash capped it.
Did you get a final gravity difference mashing that 2 degrees higher?
Well, like I said earlier, I was in a rush. I hadn't heated my mash tun properly when I needed to get it done, so it didn't end up at 68. I'd have to look on.
I mean, I'd expect almost the yeast are going to have a bit more of an effect, aren't they, as well?
Yeah.
On the final gravity, some will attenuate a little bit more.
Yeah. I mean, you must. Well, I gave you quite a few of these beers, seeing as I made it for you. So, yeah, I don't know. What do you? Does it feel? Do you feel you get the Columbus or anything through? What's your?
No, I wouldn't have said that at all. No, I mean, I was actually just about to go and grab one from my keg fridge, because I've had to keep a few of them, having after I had COVID, I couldn't really smell anything a bit. So, but no, I wouldn't have never have guessed Columbus. I mean, the oak aged ones have that sort of hint of vanilla to them, which is really lovely in it. And yeah, and now I'm thinking, like, I need to oak age several of the beers I might do. But yeah, I mean, I would never have guessed Columbus, but I think the beer could take a bit of that. If I'm honest, even some later hops, I think might work quite well. Yeah.
The Brett one was interesting. So I made the beer, and then I added bits of oak spiral that I'd been sent from the US, and then one with Clausini, and one with, what's the other one? Lambicus. And then I think I left them 9 months in demijohns in the lounge to do their piece. I've got 1 bottle of each left, which I'll bring down to lab sometime, because it's quite interesting to compare them. But just, my assumption there was that I guess these big vats probably didn't taste a lot of. They probably didn't have much wood character. Quite a large volume compared to the surface area of them, and then used forever. So I wouldn't have thought they got very woody, but I expect they were riddled with Brett, right? So yeah, they were interesting. Somebody's had them, haven't they? Did I send you them, James, as well?
Yeah, I had those. From memory, I think I had the Clausenii and the Lambicus quite a time apart.
Yeah.
I can't really remember the difference from memory. I think I enjoyed the Lambicus quite a lot. I think from memory, it was quite fruity.
Yeah.
The Clausenii was sort of quite Bretty, but normally Clausenii is quite fruity, but yeah, I think I like the Lambicus more.
Yeah.
From memory.
That worked quite well. It was quite interesting. Then I just fished the bits of wood out, and I've dried them out in the sun, and I'm hoping they're full of Brett for the next one. Just bung them back in.
I really like the Birds of Paradise one, Lee. I thought that was really lovely. That sort of peppery, slightly aniseedy sort of mix. It was lovely, really nice.
Yeah, grains of paradise, not birds of paradise.
Grains, a bit of the flowers, aren't I?
Yeah. This is what I put in the last. See on a camera. Can you see that?
Is that legal?
It's like a cat.
Like a long pepper thing.
It's a long pepper. Yeah. So it's about 1 inch long, and it's it's like a catkin, ground up, but yeah, quite a bit more peppery. I think it's starting to drop off, but quite interesting. And then the next one is, like I say, every time I make one, someone says, "Oh, I've heard of a pepper." These, I don't know if you can see that, grains of selim, which are kind of like, I don't know, like a seed pod, but dried down. And then there was another pepper that numbs your mouth. I didn't think that would be that.
That's on it.
To be honest, but yeah, if you go onto the web, there are a couple. I think this is Spices on the Web or somewhere else. There's probably 20 different peppers, and we've all just narrowed down to black pepper wins, but in the old days there were all sorts of ones that were good and slightly different.
When you were trying to get it orangey, Lee, did you? I've tried that in my last couple actually with Challenger hops, which I always found kind of orangey, and some Amarillo, trying to get a nice balance there. I think, in fact, that happened after the Howling Hops one, where that brown ale came round. There was the American brown ale that was full of Amarillo. Yeah. So I swapped, trying to get some orangey American hops in. Have you given those a whirl?
I haven't. I've got some Mandarina Bavaria as well, which is meant to be really orangey. I should try. Yeah,
it does work really well with all those chocolate, coffee, dark flavors. That orange is like a kind of Terry's chocolate orange of beer, but not so sweet. It does work really well. I'm intrigued. I've never tried West Yorkshire ale, even though I used that in that bitter that time. And that sounds like it'd be a brilliant idea. I've just used SO4,
right,
which was fairly normal, I think. But I bet that. Oh yeah, what's the West Yorkshire ale like? Does it really give a nice rounded?
I'm very poor at picking out yeast flavors. I think it flocculates really well. It's easy to use and handle, and I didn't talk anything about fermentation temperatures, did it? But I tend to always be fermenting colder at the cold end of any yeast ranges, so it's quite nice and clean.
Isn't that the one Jamil uses for all of his English style beers as well?
I don't know. I'm copying him and everything else, but the Yorkshire Ale was just my my invention.
Yeah, I seem to remember from like recent brewing with style or whatever it is. Yeah, he raves about West Yorkshire Ale yeast for English styles.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try that next time.
Have you ever looked at making a stronger version, like a robust porter or an imperial porter kind of thing? I'd love to sort of see that version of it.
Yeah, I mean, it was back in 2015. You didn't have the 2015 guidelines, right? They didn't come out till 2018, if I remember rightly. And so this was made to be a robust porter. Fits that category from the 2008. Where I mean, every year when we do the old bastard annual sort of brew that's meant to be smoked and oaked, and ideally shove a bit of bourbon or whiskey or something in as well. I've amped that one up to be imperial, up to about 8-9%, I think, James. But I've not taken the Bring Your Daughter to the Porter and done anything with it to make it more sessionable and more strong. It's quite interesting, actually. Might be a good idea, I think.
Yeah, I'd love to try that version of it.
Well,
there you go. He's heard his name.
Who?
Oh, sorry. Porter's just come to visit me.
Oh, good. Right, yeah, sorry. I'm trying to look at two screens, because once you've got your display up.
Lee, can you talk a bit about the difference between brown and amber? I've only ever used brown. I don't think I've used amber. And are they quite different, or are they quite similar?
Yes, yeah, they're quite different in colour. Did I wrote a little bit somewhere.
They're two of the ones as well where they vary massively between maltster.
Yeah. So there you go, top there.
Oh yeah.
I was just searching brown versus amber on the web to see if anyone could pick anything out. It's quite a lot lighter.
Amber is.
Yeah. It looks quite visibly different than brown.
Okay.
Yeah, lighter, a bit more biscuity. Yeah, I mean, you'd have to chomp on a few they're quite hard to describe, both of these, I think, with this, like I say, slight chemical or synthetic taste, but
Yeah,
compare the two.
I do have both knocking around here actually. So
I
and you
found
can
it
swap them in just one for the other.
it depends upon the maltster, because I found like the Thomas Fawcett Amber is closer to the crisp brown
Right.
than it is to the crisp amber. It's almost like the easier way of looking at it is their EBC. That will give you a better idea. I mean, because they're done in they're sort of a very light, essentially very light roasted converted malt, isn't it? So and the brown
Yeah,
is just a bit
it's really
further
hard.
along
I
than
mean,
the amber.
yeah, I think if you're going to do a comparison between the two, so two beers, you've got to stick to the same maltster if you're going to do one beer with an amber and then with a brown. Otherwise, yeah, it's like chalk and cheese. Otherwise, isn't it?
Oh, really?
So certainly, I found like the crisp brown is quite nice and toasty. Although when you taste it, there's a bit of sharpness to it, a bit of bitterness to it. But the Fawcett one, I think, is even more. It's sort of quite intensely like almost roast coffee beanish, or going in that direction. So it's even more of that.
It's interesting if you read that bottom statement on there, right? Don't use more than 1%, whatever. Let's try and move on. I'm up at 12.
wow.
I'm up at 10, 12. Way above.
Was that of amber specifically? Or?
Well, amber or brown.
Yeah,
I mean, essentially with my brew length, it's a kilo.
Right.
Of either, yeah.
Mine's like 12% brown as well.
Yeah. I'm just
loads of it, and like 4% black or something.
Yeah. I'm just.
So Lee, which you use the crisp brown malt?
Yeah.
Yeah, I used crisp. That's the only one I've used. The only one I know.
I think Maltman has sold Thomas Fawcett as well, I think.
Yeah, I tried it very early on in my brewing, and yeah, it was just sort of drier, more stronger sort of coffee flavour.
Okay.
More tasted more roasted, basically. So yeah, and I think it's a higher EBC as well. So
I'll give it a go.
So modern brown malts 50 to 70 L, so it's that 100 to 150 EBC, and I did actually put them on. That's what these ones in brackets are. I didn't fill out the amber. The brown was 150.
Oh, yeah.
just having a quick look and seeing like crisp brown malt is 150 EBC. Thomas Fawcett appears to be the same. Must have changed that. But then there's like Simpson's brown malt is nearer 500 EBC,
Yeah.
so a lot darker.
Right.
A lot different, isn't it? Yeah.
Worthwhile is occasionally looking at the spec sheets for the malts and things like that as well. Yeah, so there's Fawcett says it's between 430 and 600.
Yeah.
Much
Yeah.
darker malt.
Quite different.
Sorry, Simpson said that, not Fawcett.
All right.
How did you work out the proportion of black to chocolates in the end? I think when I started, the first one I did, I got out of the Durden Park book, that 1850 London Whitbread.
Yeah.
Which is whatever it is, like 80%, or no, it's like 75% pale, like 12 brown, and then 8 black or something insane.
Wow.
Whatever it was.
Yeah.
absolutely nuts. It was great. It was really good, and it took my head off a little bit. So I've kind of dialed it down a little bit, and it's very similar to like your last one, I think, at the minute. So I've added in some crystal to sweeten up a little bit. I've got very similar chocolate to black ratio. So tried it both ways, like all chocolate or all black, and so, I want a little bit of the bite from the black. And how did you work it out?
I honestly can't remember. We're going back 6 years to that original one. I mean, generally what I do is have a good look at any BYO articles, anything in, is it Ray Daniels often has an IBU at SG target to go for. I'll have a look at Brewing Classic Styles, Randy Mosher, and then anything I find on the web. And then I tend to just pick the bits that resonate with me and mash it all up and maybe try something a bit different, Steve. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of layering that roasty toastiness, right? Pale chocolate, black. I mean, there's all sorts you can get dehusked, and I think the types of malts at that end are changing. So you can play around at that, and then you've got the kind of that mid hit of amber and brown and whatever you want to do with your crystal. So I mean, it'd be quite nice to try some extra dark crystal at some point instead of the lighter one, I think, and get some sort of plums out of it. But yeah, it's pretty endless, I think, how you can tweak it.
It's funny. It's a bit like the dark beer version of Saison. You can it's quite a lot of parameters, levers you can pull.
Yeah, and you can see I haven't really played with it other than using different hops and yeast from the first one. Just worked. Everyone loved it. Did all right. I just kept remaking it, but I am just now starting to maybe make it a bit more modern with mash capping and a bit more colour grade.
So like the adding a portion of the dark crystal malt maybe in place of the regular crystal or something would be, because I've found that's the one I ended up doing for Haysenbrau, and I really like the beer in the end, but it's not sort of middle of the style for porter.
It'd be interesting to ditch the crystal rye. I think I don't think that's probably doing much at all. You could probably get some spiciness from the hops and try a different crystal.
The other thing I was going to say was, Steve, you said about like the bite from black, but I found one of the stouts I make, I went through a while ago and like tasted all the malts in it on the brew day, and found like sort of amber was sort of quite toasty, and then brown was get a bit more burnt, and then I tried the chocolate that's very burnt, and then after that I tried the black, and it was actually just like sort of a pleasant, smoky, slightly ashy. It wasn't as sort of bitter. So
chocolate's the worst.
Sorry?
Chocolate's the worst for that.
Yeah, it was like black sort of it's like it had gone past the end of the scale and had gone back to being fairly smooth. And actually chocolate had the biggest bite to it of all.
Well, maybe I was
just the most sort of bitter and acrid.
Yeah, it's a bit of a misnomer, isn't it? Because it doesn't really taste of chocolate either. But I think you see the name and you think, I'll put loads of that in. But it's definitely the most acrid. And
that's funny because I used some quite dark chocolate. It was must be about 1400 against black, which was about the same as yours. And I did one that was all black and then one was all chocolate. In fact, I think I talked to Mick Harrison about it. In fact, Mick, you did a post about it on Jim's Beer Kit a billion years ago and wondered if anyone had done the swap. And I did try it next to each other, and the chocolate one was definitely smoother. But in any case, I did my first mash cap, like on the one, and in fact, I bumped it from 66 to 68 centigrade as well. And it's noticeably different and smoother and much more palatable. And I've got to say nicer, to be honest. Doing it that way. I quite liked the fact that it was quite acrid before because it was a bit of a showstopper, but yeah, I can't drink too many of those. But as it is now, quite similar. Mash capping, it was really smooth. It's really nice.
Yeah.
It's a really good trick.
I generally up
Maybe
my
less active.
Dark malts by about 10% if I'm mash capping it. Because I didn't with this one, but I'd gone up on the SG a little bit, so there was a bit more in there. That makes sense.
And yours finishing up 1018 or something, like 1020 or something, did you say? I think mine finishes at 1020. Something like that.
Won't be it.
I don't know.
SCFG.
20.
No, it's gone right down. Like I said, I don't think I hit. Yeah, I don't think I hit high enough though. I think it was about 64 even. It was lower than it normally is when I was aiming higher in the mash. Next time I'll spend a bit more time preheating the mash time.
And is it not too dry when it's like 10, 11? There's still lots of body in it.
No, there's plenty, wasn't there, James? It's quite
Good at
crisp.
68.
I'm just going back to see if I've used anything other than crisp. Oh, that doesn't even say.
Nate, one question, sort of slight aside question. The which site are the hops in your car park? At Ware or in Stevenage?
Where?
Okay.
Yeah, and you could just drive on, Mick, but they've put a barrier up. I haven't been to work for a year and a half, so I have no idea if they've stripped the fence down or anything.
I'd have known about that when I worked there.
Right, good. Well, I hope that was useful. Interesting. Put something together pretty quick, actually. It doesn't take as long as you don't need to spend too long on it, I guess. It took about an hour and a half, I think.
And you know what you're talking about. I mean, it's your recipe, so yeah. Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Yeah, great talk.
Thank you.
Yeah, brilliant, mate. Thank you.